Alright, it's time to get our hands dirty finally. In this lecture, we're going to be creating a brand new Xamarin Forms application, and we're going to be initializing the repository. So of course, initializing the repository is going to enable us to track new versions, have that source control ready, eventually push everything to GitHub where the foundations of CI and CD are going to be set. So I'm here in Visual Studio 2019 for Mac. This of course is also going to work on Windows. Keep in mind that for this you should already have a Git installed. I'm going to assume that you already have that since that was in the requirements for this course. If you don't have Git installed, it's just a very quick process. You can just download the installer and install it on Mac and Windows or Linux, though you probably don't have Linux since you're going to be developing for Xamarin. So let's just dive right in. I am going to be creating a new Xamarin Forms project in here. So I will select multi-platform blank forms app. This process is not the important one. This application is actually just a test application. I am going to click on next, set a project in here. Again, this is some test. I can select Android, iOS. This is again not important right now. I'm going to click on next, and in here I am going to find the very first important thing when it comes to source control. And something very similar is going to appear on Windows. I have the ability right from here in this version control section to use Git for source control and to create a gitignore file to ignore some inessential files that Xamarin works with. Most of the times you want to select both of these. Right now I am not going to be selecting them because I want to show you a different way in which you're going to be initializing the Git version control, and that is going to be the manual way. In the next section though, when we actually create the Xamarin project that we're going to be working on, you should remember to select both of these. I just want to show you exactly what would happen by doing these steps manually. So I am going to be deselecting them, and I can change the location where this is going to be saved and click on create. As soon as this is created, what I really want to do is open the terminal. I am not going to be working from Visual Studio 2019 just yet. So here is my project, and I can see that I indeed have a normal Xamarin Forms project with 3 different projects inside: the Android, the iOS, and the .NET Standard library. But again, what I want to do right now is open the terminal. And from the terminal, I am going to be initializing the repository, the very first step that you should execute as soon as you create a project. Again, in our scenario, Visual Studio can do it for us, but I am going to show you exactly what you would have to do. So first things first, I have to navigate to where my project was created. And in my case, it was inside of the projects folder. If I list all of the directories inside of the projects folder, here I have the some test folder, which of course contains my application. So let's just get inside of that some test folder. And in here is where I am going to have the project, the solution file, and the 3 different projects. The some test, which is the .NET Standard library, the some test.android, which of course is the Android project, and the some test.ios. Here is where I want to initialize the repository. Here where all of the files are. And the reason why we should initialize the repository exactly in here is because initializing the repository is going to create a folder and some files inside of it where the tracking is going to happen. The tracking of new versions is going to happen. So it is very important that you navigate to this folder. And in here, all we have to do is execute git init. This is going to initialize an empty repository. It currently has nothing inside, but it has been initialized. And notice that it says exactly where this was initialized. It was initialized in the current directory, which is the some test folder inside of the projects folder, and it has created a .git folder. And we can confirm it by listing all of the files inside of this folder. I just added the -a parameter in here, and you can indeed see how this .git folder exists right here inside of the some test folder. Here is where all of the tracking is going to happen. Right now that the version control has been initialized, we also have a new branch, the master branch. Although it is currently empty, no commits have been made, nothing is being tracked, but the repository is there with the first default master branch that we mentioned in the previous lecture. Remember that when I talked about the branch structure, I mentioned that the master branch will always have, or should always have, a working version of your project. This is that master branch, the one that gets created by default. So there you have it. Very quickly, we have initialized the repository. In the next lecture, we're going to make some changes, make our first commit. Of course, for that, we have to learn a couple of commands in case you weren't familiar with them. But once we have that, we're going to be creating the other branches that we're going to be working on and push all of this over to GitHub, where, as I have been mentioning, we're going to have the foundation of our CI and CD process.